So it's one thing to know what our food is made up of, but we need to be able to apply that in a practical way in order to create a balanced diet and a healthful one. So the first step that I want you to think about is filling your plate, and I'm going to be using more dinner type examples here, but it's quite easy to translate these into your breakfasts and your lunches. But to think about filling your plate with about half of your non-starchy vegetables. So that's things like your leafy greens, broccoli, carrots, celery, cucumber, all these less dense vegetables and carbohydrates that provide a lot of great fiber and a lot of great vitamins and minerals. So that's going to take up about 50% of your plate. So the next portion of your plate, up to about a maximum of 25%, would be your starchy carbohydrates. So that's things like your potatoes or sweet potatoes, squash, pumpkin, rice, lentils or legumes, and whole grains. And this is not something that you necessarily have to include at every meal. You really need to see for yourself how much energy your body needs, because these carbohydrates are much more energy dense. And you just have to experiment and see what suits you the best. Some days you might want those on the side, and some days you might not need them. Then the last 25%, more or less of course, is going to be your protein. So you do need to be mindful, whatever your protein source is, to look up what roughly a serving of that would be, because depending on where it's coming from, the size is going to vary. But think about that being about a quarter of your plate for the protein. And then the final step is the fat, and that's going to be more sprinkled across and incorporated into the food that you're making. So one thing to keep in mind is that in terms of energy or calories, fat is actually twice the amount of energy per gram from carbohydrates and protein. So that's why we don't actually have to, in a physical sense, have such a high amount of it on our plate, but sprinkling it throughout is going to get us the amount that we need. So what I like to try and aim for as a starting point for everybody is to think about getting 40% carbohydrates, 30% protein, and 30% fat, so 40, 30, 30. And that's based on the calories that you're getting. So per gram, you get about 4 calories for carbohydrates and protein, and fat comes in at 9 calories per gram. So that's why I'm saying we're just sprinkling the fat throughout, but we still want to reach that 30% share of our calories. And trust me, you'll get there through your cooking oils, through your nuts and seeds that might be on top of a salad, through salad dressing or sauces. The fat gets incorporated in your meal very easily, and it's going to make it taste great. So I want to give you a couple examples of some dinners that it's very easy to see how we are coming to these different steps that I've talked about. So the first one is the stuffed chicken recipe. First, we have a nice example of the non-starchy carbs. Here you can see half the plate roughly has been taken up by the salad greens with the grapes, the cucumbers, and then also less visible, of course, is the sun-dried tomatoes that are in the chicken. Then you have a good portion of starchy carbs in the potatoes. The protein is your chicken breast, as well as feta to a little bit lesser extent. And then we have fat throughout the dish in the feta cheese, in the seeds that are on top of the salad, and as well the olive oil that we've used in cooking the chicken and the potatoes, and as well as in the salad dressing. So the second example is the pork chop. So here we have a good serving again of the non-starchy carbs in the red cabbage and apple combination, as well as with the broccoli. And here we don't actually have any starchy carbs, but you could very easily incorporate them if you would feel that you would need it. You could add in some rice, a little bit of pasta, some lentils, or a bit of potatoes, sweet potato, that all would go great. You have a serving of protein in the pork chop, and then the fat again is throughout, so you have some fat in your pork chop. You also have the butter that's been used in cooking, and then also a bit of olive oil that was used in cooking.